What I find most amusing about this particular video is that we will constantly have people who will tell us that society hates women, just hates them. Just that's a constant narrative, a constant message that we're always seeing and always hearing, and yet we can still make videos like this, where people will use women as a sort of, oh, women have it worse and you must pay attention to the women's because it will generate more sympathy, it will generate in the case of this lung cancer charity, it will generate more funding. And that, I suppose, is the thing that's given me the biggest fucking giggle about this. At no point in this video did I use the trigger word gynocentrism. Because, well, it's kind of funny. If I do talk about gynocentrism at any degree of length in any video, you know, sort of, oh, this idea that, no, society does have some sort of preferential treatment for women or some sort of preferential position that women occupy within society. Why is this? Well, it's an evolutionary strategy of behavior that ensures reproduction of the species, it ensures that it's able to keep going, you know, those that protected the limiting factor of reproduction, which is ultimately what women are, would be more successful at passing on their genes, therefore ensuring that the next generation would be more likely to exhibit that behavior or more likely to be able to manifest that behavior, and so on and so forth, and it just continued on throughout all of humanity like that. Should you dare to then mention that this process is reinforced by a reproductive strategy in humans known as hypergamy, the notion that women do have criteria by which they select the men they want to have sex with, and that this usually gravitates towards social status and resource provision, which is actually, again, a sign of social status. But the only reason that men need to have that is because that is the thing that makes them better than other men. That is the pseudo-tournament part of human reproduction. And the only reason that that works to attract females, or that women will find that attractive, is because of gynocentrism. It's a constant feedback loop. You have resources and social status which you share with a woman. She finds that attractive and benefits. Both of those traits get passed on to the offspring, and then they're magnified because they're successful. If you dare to point out that hypergamy and gynocentrism exist, you get a shitload of flack from certain people on the internet. And people who just really don't want to hear about it, they just sort of want to deny that mate selection in human beings is a thing, but only when it comes to women for some reason. And yet, the behavioral pattern that leads to that sort of behavior, the we must protect the women's a kind of attitude that society has, that humans have, since it's basically a human universal, this leads us to this pattern of gynocentrism. And what I find is funny, to bring this background to this actual video, I don't specifically mention the term gynocentrism, and I've kind of not done it because, again, I notice sometimes when you do it, people get very jerky knees. They get kind of like, oh, well, what are you trying to say about the humans? You know, it's like they don't like this idea that their behavior is in some way biologically influenced, or some people don't. They really sort of get very upset about it. I think they've sort of got in their mind some sort of human divine argument that, no, humans are above their biology, they've transcended it, or some such nonsense like that. And what I love about this video is, first of all, we've got advertisers in that video playing the gynocentrism game. We know they are. It's the, oh, well, think of the women who are the victims of this. Now, the point of that video is, as I've demonstrated, no, women are really not the primary victim of lung cancer. It is massively disproportionately men. And I've just kind of left it to linger there. Just like, yeah, you're playing this angle. I'm not going to try and extrapolate why. I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to let it sort of hang as to why you might be doing this. And the number of comments in that section going, well, I think you've missed the point here. Society obviously cares more about women than men. And that's why they're playing this angle, because they know they're going to get more funding. Yeah, you missed something there. No, not at all. That is exactly the point. This is something that I'm very well aware of because I've spoken about it at great length on this channel before. I just find it really funny that if I mention it and say, like, well, this is a pattern of behavior called gynocentrism led through via mate choice and mate preference and how people socially interact, and processes like intersexual competition and hypergamy and all of this sort of nonsense, which has caused society to come out in the way that it has, because society is ultimately a product of biology. If an animal doesn't have the faculty to produce a certain pattern of behavior, you will not see that kind of behavior manifest in whatever social organization they have. It just won't happen. If I mention it directly, you get all of the jerky knees and all the people going, oh, hashtag not all, and all of that sort of nonsense. But if you just kind of let it hang there, suddenly all the people leap up and say, well, I know, society prefers women to men and gives them preferential treatment. Apparently you just can't please an audience. If you state everything outright and are like, here's the reason that this is, here's all the evidence for it, you just get all the denialists telling you, no, that's not how it is, you're being an ideologue, demagogue, blah, 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 blah. If you don't say it, then you get all the people saying, well, it's obvious that this is a thing because that's just how it works. Truly bizarre. But I love the fact that products such as this lung cancer advert are able to exist in a society that just hates women. Hey, feminists, if society truly hated women, why would the just think of to women's angle be so successful in generating funding and revenue? Why would you use the just think of the women's angle in an issue that disproportionately affects men? Oh, right, because you know it will generate more sympathy and more funding. Because people, by default, give more of a shit about women than men. I suppose ultimately it's just another piece of evidence that goes into the binder of gynocentrism, just another piece of paper in the ever-growing stack of evidence on the side of that theory. And this, I suppose, is again just another piece of evidence in favour of what's been started to be termed the empathy gap. The fact that society and most individuals have a very marked difference in levels of empathy that they are willing to show from men to women. Anyway, I suppose we should probably have a little chat about some of the research that was done for this, because that's the purpose of the open hours thing. It's not just to expand a little bit more on that. I suppose I can also tell you a little bit more about some of the fun done researching this. So when I started off looking at lung cancer as a whole, or when I realized this was about lung cancer, I didn't particularly have any preconceived notion going into it about who should be more affected by it. I had a bit of an inkling that it should be men more so than women, basically just down to a few factors. We know that men are more likely to work in sort of highly industrialized jobs and things where they're going to be more likely to breathe in carcinogenic substances, and men do seem to be more likely on average than women to smoke and to engage in pretty much any other sort of behavior that is generally detrimental to their bodies compared to women. So I sort of had an idea that I would expect men to be a bit higher, but I didn't necessarily expect them, in some cases throughout Europe, to be nearly twice the rates. That was quite a shock, and I was actually quite surprised that there was basically never really a point of parity at all. The only example that I could really find was Scotland. Ultimately, for the sake of the video, though, the actual cause of the lung cancer is irrelevant. You know, why men get it more than women has no actual bearing on this video at all. It's an irrelevant point, since all we're looking at here is basically why people die from it, because their entire angle was, it's women who are too often taken. And yet, actual evidence shows you that, no, it's men who are more often taken. So, if women are too often taken, then what does that make men? Well, quite possibly, just like prostate cancer, it makes them privileged, or something. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up since this has gone on for ages. After hours thoughts, is it something actually worth doing? Or has this just been a complete and utter waste of time?